Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. Wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking. Time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. This is so much hatred, war, and poverty. Wake up, all the teachers. Time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. 'Cause they're the one who's coming up and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it, yeah. Just you and me. Who remembers that song? Wake up all the doctors, make the old people well. 'Cause they're the ones who suffer and who catch all the hell. But they don't have so very long before their judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away? Wake up all the builders, time to build a new land. I know that we can do it if we all lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our minds. Surely things will work out. They do it every time. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it, yeah. Just you and me. Now, of course, this song goes on and on and on. Teddy Pendergrass, yes. Wake up, everybody. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Who remembers that song? And good morning to those of you who are coming in. I want to welcome you today to Daring Dialogues Black Table Talk Edition. And if you're with me for the first time, you can tell me good morning, and you can also tell me where you are signing in the world. You don't have to give your specific city, but you can just, tell me what state you are signing in so we can know who we have with us on today. If you're with me for the first time, again, this is Daring Dialogues. This is my daily podcast. We broadcast simultaneously on Tuesdays here on Facebook, and also we're broadcasting on our YouTube channel. Other than today, we are here Monday through Friday, but we're only solely on YouTube on the other days. Why, you ask? Because it makes more sense to be over there every single day when Facebook erases our live streams every 30 days. So Facebook no longer allows a permanent archive of some of the most empowering and encouraging messages that we put out. YouTube still allows us to have an archive, and so that's where all of our broadcasts are archived for you over there. And you can go and check out our multiple playlists we have of our prior seasons so you can get an idea of what it is that we do on the podcast Beyond Today. This is a read aloud podcast. I call it the Reading Rainbow for adults. But today we're going to talk about something very, very important, and that is reading, writing, and publishing, right? Everybody has been talking recently, if you have not seen it, um, I've seen a couple of clips, but I am going to go back and watch the entire thing. People have been talking about this interview that was done on another podcasting forum called Jubilee. And the setup is called Surrounded, where people come together of usually differing opinions to debate. And this latest debate that has gone on with Amanda Seals, um, and her versus 20 conservatives. And a lot of people are coming away from that dialogue and wondering what happened? Where did we go wrong? Oh my gosh, there's a crisis in education. There's a crisis in information. There's a crisis in knowledge. There's a crisis, there's a crisis, there's a crisis. Well, as an educator who's been in the field for 25 years, who has been teaching through the crisis, and warning people and explaining to people and encouraging parents and advocating for parents and saying, hey, you need to teach your children. You need to teach your children. And if you don't have the time to teach them, you need to immerse them. You just like if you were in a pool and you were getting baptized, most of us understand what a baptism looks like, where you go into the water and the minister or the leader takes you and they bring you under the water and bring you back up. That's what some of our young people need when it comes to knowledge about self, knowledge about their own history, and knowledge about the African diaspora. They need a baptism. They need a full immersion in self, in understanding self. They need a full immersion in Black history and culture. And the reality is, nobody outside of the culture is really going to be pushing you to do that. They're not going to be pushing it. So that means you have to push it. It has to be your responsibility. It has to be your cultural call. It has to be your heart and your passion to see your culture carry forward into the future. And you don't do that by leaving a group of young people or a generation of young people behind. And you don't do that by leaving them with gaps. Because the reality is, we have so much more information now. We know so much more. Some of our information, right, has been updated, things that we might have thought in the past. We've got some updated and revised versions of things, right? We have some things that are more culturally informed. I look back at the writing of, for example, James Cone and how he did a 20th anniversary edition of his work. And in that 20th anniversary edition, how he began to write and say, hey, I know that I wrote this, but I know that I needed more liberatory voices, more womanist voices within my writing. So we do have not just the past, but we have some updates and revisions that are truthful revisions, I have to say that, that are truthful revisions to the historical record that we can pull on. We don't have to rely, right, on outside sources anymore the way that we used to in the past to get our information about ourselves. I'm so excited about Black Americans and people who are choosing to travel in the world and broaden their horizons, right? So all of that is important. And we're going to be reading from Bell Hooks. We'll read a segment of her today, but I want to talk about a little bit about why are people so shocked that the people that Amanda Seals were debating, that they were full of propaganda. They were shocked because some people have not been paying attention, because the other side is building and has been building for a very long time, decades even, their propaganda machines. So whether that came through white Christian nationalist schools, private schools, because that's what they are, a lot of them, whether that came through the Heritage Foundation, which pushes out a lot of political propaganda. They're the ones who gave us Project 2025, whether that is Prager University, which is actually not a university, it is a propaganda machine that pushes out animated videos of revisionist American and Black American history. And now they have Prager U for Kids, which is the curriculum that is now being pumped in through school boards, through lawmakers and policymakers who are pushing this propaganda, this ahistorical, this non historical, this not even education based curriculum through to schools across the country. This is what is happening in real time. And so when people say, I don't understand how those young people that she was debating had so much untruth and just falsehoods and narratives and spins on data that they were trying to put out here. They don't understand how did we get to this place. Well, the reality is, the good news about it is they were a small microcosm. They were not the majority. But the goal is to make sure that that kind of thinking and indoctrination and falsehoods doesn't become the majority thoughts in our communities, because it was straight propaganda. It really was. And so when people say, when I look at that, how could they have gotten there? They could get there through a lot of pathways. We have people in our community that do not have a love for self. We have people in our community that don't have love for Black history. We have people in our community that, in some cases, have been pushed out of community and are finding places to belong. And unfortunately, some of those places that they're finding to belong are pushing propaganda. We have another slice of our community that has chosen to assimilate into and live in predominantly white spaces, disconnected from culture. And so, in those kind of spaces, they're not learning what they need to learn about Black history if their own parents are removing themselves from the culture and from Blackness because they want to assimilate. So there are a lot of pathways as to how did we get here. We can't just say it's one particular thing. But what we can do is we can understand the power of reading, we can understand the power of writing, we can understand the power of publishing. And speaking to that, I want to show you a couple things here before we get into bell hooks. If you are a person who has been thinking about writing, if you're a person who is aspiring to write, aspiring to publish, I want to encourage you today to get it done. If there's a story, if there's a part of your history, your family history, your personal history that you feel like I've got to get this out into the world, this is your clarion call today to get moving. Um, for me, that came in the form of writing fiction. I wanted to be able to tell a story about Black people as I saw us and as we are oftentimes rarely seen when it comes to fiction. And so I created a series. This is book two. I don't have a copy of book one on me right now, but this is book two, and this is book three. I wanted to write a story about us, for us, expressing the way that we talk, that we communicate, that we share, that we love, that we hold community. And I stopped waiting for that story to appear somewhere else. I got tired of seeing the same script over and over and over and over and over and over again. And now I'm almost feeling that way when it comes to television series. There's a lot of the same old thing, just repackaged in some different characters, right? But it's the same kind of tropes. And so I'm not saying this because I haven't done it myself. That's the point I'm making. Be what you want to see in the world. You want to see a change, you want to see a difference, you want to see a different narrative, you want to see a different story, then you're going to have to be a part of that change. All right. And as my readers jokingly say, these are not short books. Okay. Because I had a lot to say, I had a lot to show and demonstrate about who we are as a people, how we love as a people, how we connect with each other. What does Black love look like from a Black perspective? Not from the perspective of somebody who is not Black. What does it look like to live in the South? My stories are centered in Savannah, which is one of my favorite, absolute favorite cities in the world. What does it look like to have community in the South? One of the greatest compliments that I've gotten about those works is that, man, I live here in Savannah. And when I read your work, Savannah comes alive. I can picture in the city. I can picture the shops that people are going to and the restaurants and things that you're talking about. The beauty of Savannah. That is the highest compliment that somebody can pay me because I wanted to do my research. I didn't want to write a surface story about the city or about the people. And so, again, get your writing out there. Maybe you don't have a publisher, maybe you don't have the editor yet, but start writing. If the work and the idea has been in your mind for some years now, this is the time to start writing. Now, I want to move to another example. All right. We're talking about helping our young people understand and know their history so that they are not duped by propagandists. All right. One of my favorite people, you see her a little bit here in my background, is Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells is one of my spiritual inspirations. Her life as an educator, being forced to flee her town, her stand for justice, her witness of the Southern horrors, and how she was many times willing to risk her life to go and get the information and the data to be able to record it and share it and publish it abroad to the world, to the Black community, to let people know what was happening so that people's stories, people's names, people's legacy would not be lost. She's an inspiration to me. And so, as an educator, I'm going to teach about Ida B. Wells. It just makes sense to me. Why would I leave Ida B. Wells out of the story of Black American history and women and their impact? But if I am trying to teach on Ida B. Wells to young people, Ida B. Wells, but how do I break this down and make it attainable for young people to learn about her? So maybe if I'm working with younger students, I'm going to use this book here, Ida B. Wells' Voice of Truth. It is a very short children's book. See that? It's not very long. It is beautifully, if I can get it open, it is beautifully illustrated. Some of the illustrations are taken from actual photographs, right? It's large print inside to grab young people's attention. Okay? So that's what I'm that's this will be my introduction book to my younger people in my life. Okay? As I continue to go, I'm gonna go up a notch. I'm still covering who Ida B. Wells is, but now I'm gonna add some more details. I'm gonna add the context of what was happening when she was alive. I'm gonna add the context of history around Ida B. Wells. Again, this book is for young readers and it has plenty of illustrations. Where am I going from there? Maybe for my middle to high schoolers, I'm going to read Ida B. the Queen. Again, Illustrations always help. Still adding in that extra context, but I've got more text. I've got more, and as you can see, I've written in my book, more visuals of Ida. There's larger text. There's also breakdowns of different terminologies and definitions. There's documents inside, right? And then when I get to the end of this particular one, there's a whole timeline in the back of what things were going on and when. Okay? Whole timeline. Sources cited. Okay? So by the time my child, okay, has gotten to high school, their understanding of Ida B. Wells, and this is just one example, when somebody comes and says something that doesn't align with what they know about Ida B. Wells, they have a foundation that they can pull from. Okay? For my more well read students, or my higher education students, or my high school students that may be gifted AP, IB, I might challenge them to read Ida B. Wells' The Light of Truth. These are her writings. Okay? And then I might encourage them to pick up a second source, Crusade for Justice, the autobiography of Ida B. Wells. Okay? So, what did I just do? I'm building slowly but surely on that historical person, that historical figure. All right? So, when people say to me, excuse me, I don't know where to begin, I want you to play, when people say to you, I don't know where to begin, I want you to play this video for them. I want you to clip this part, make it a reel, however you want to do it, and show them how you can take the same historical figure and go from your young ages all the way to your higher education slash adults. That's how you begin to build a foundation that when your child is sitting before somebody that's asking them questions, they're not spouting off propaganda, because that's what sites like Prager University are. They're propaganda sites. Okay? Now, if you're a parent and you're saying, this is a lot to take in, maybe I do have some gaps to fill in and I'm not quite sure where to begin. As I said, we have so many more resources now that can help you in a variety of ways and on different levels to fill in those gaps. Sometimes you need to fill in gaps for yourself. I have lots of books, history books, where I'm reading to fill in gaps for myself, things that I did not get when I was in school, right? As an adult. So, as an adult with children, you might need to spend some time filling in gaps for yourself before you start trying to fill in those gaps for your child. All right? Couple of recommendations. African American history, a very short introduction to African American history. Again, it's not long, but it will help you fill in some gaps. If you want to be entertained and you're just like, you know what, this history thing is really not my cup of tea. I know I need it, but it's not really my cup of tea. You want to be entertained? Michael Harriot. Michael Harriot, the unwhitewashed story of America, Black AF history, very entertaining, filled with facts and sources and data. So if history is not your thing, I'm going to recommend that you start here because he does make it really entertaining. As a black child in America and as a black person in America, I'm going to recommend this one because it's been taught. And this book talks about how did we get here? How did we get to the American myth of domination and colonization and imperialism? What premises are being taught? How did we get here? This is a book you want to pick up. And being that we have a race scientist running Health and Human Services, you might want to pick this book up. It's called Superior: The Return of Race Science. Now, this book was written, let me come back to it. This book was written in 2019. We are in the second half of 2025, and here we are. The return of race science. So if you don't understand what is happening with Health and Human Services and why we are going backwards when it comes to things like research being defunded, vaccine schedules being altered or removed altogether, a whole new board of people who think like this has taken over our Health and Human Services. I tell people often right now in this hour, try to stay as healthy as you possibly can because everything is going to be compromised. Everything is going to be compromised. Data, research, funding, doctors, the closing of medical facilities, everything is going to be compromised. It's already starting. But this will give you a little bit of breakdown of who is now running things and what they actually believe about everybody who is not white, male, and biologically male. All right. I hope that I have given you enough to think about in terms of all of this with reading, writing, and publishing. And now we're going to read a little bit of bell hooks to put some of this into perspective even more. The book we're reading from is Rock My Soul: Black People and Self-Esteem by Bell Hooks. What we saw in the clips that have been going around is Black people whose self-esteem has been empowered in the style of Stephen Flamingo. That's what I saw when I was looking at some of those people that were sitting across from Amanda Seales and spouting off white nationalists, white Christian supremacists talking points. It was like watching whiteness move through a Black body. And part of that is because they found belonging. Be careful when you look only for belonging, but you don't look for truth. Because what we saw in those videos and what we are seeing is we're seeing people who are finding belonging while being propagandized. And so they think that because they agree with the propaganda, that the people that have chosen to feed it to them, that those people side with them, that they're their friends, that they're the people that are going to be there for them. And I can tell you from experience, I can tell you from being in those political circles, I can tell you from the Black conservatives I know, that when they get done with you, they will discard you. They will. And unfortunately, some of the Black conservatives I knew are no longer here because they died. Like I'm not saying that as a gotcha. They listened to poor information during the first term of 45-47, and it cost them their life. And I would hate to see more lives go down the drain and be destroyed because of propaganda. But let's get into what Bell Hooks says today about writing, reading, and publishing. In my work on writing, I have documented the intensity of my working class father's pursuit of learning, his passion for reading, a race man interested in racial uplift. He was then and is today clear that Black people can never count on schools to give us a real, well rounded education, one where Black history and culture are affirmed. If your child is in a culturally affirming school, you probably need to be shouting hallelujah. Because to be honest, there are lots of schools that do not do cultural affirmation of any kind, not just Black culture. They don't do it of any kind. But as she said, you cannot count on schools being culturally affirming, especially in the hour in which we now are in American history. Any examination of those periods in American history where African Americans have been engaged in organized transformation with the interest and in the interest of civil rights and freedom reveals an intense focus on reading. In the wake of civil rights and Black power anti-racist movements, Black writers wrote an amazing body of nonfiction work aimed at educating other Black people. The purpose of this literature was to provide a mass based audience with the information and knowledge that would serve as the basis for critical thinking. It was a literature of resistance. Its purpose was to educate and transform consciousness. From the late 60s to the end of the 70s, on public transportation all around the United States, Black folks of all classes could be seen reading the works of Gwendolyn Brooks, Don L. Lee, Leroy Jones, also known as Amiri Baraka, James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, Malcolm X, Alex Haley, Eldridge Cleaver, George Jackson, Sonia Sanchez, Tony Bambara, Marie Evans, and a host of other Black thinkers and writers who were bringing the word to the people. They could be seen actively engaged in reading and study. Often the messages of education for critical consciousness first came to the people through performance art in places where music and the spoken word converged. This configuration, particularly the use of popular music to express political self determination, enabled learning to take place that did not depend on literacy. It didn't depend on whether a person could read or write because they were still getting the historical message through the performances. Significantly, individual Black folks, especially Black males, were often compelled to read more, either to learn to read for the first time or to improve their reading skills, because they hungered for the new knowledge that led them in the direction of Black liberation. During this period, Black owned and operated publications were abundant. It was an accepted given that one could not go to the ethnocentric racist white press and expect it to publish militant dissident work. Yet corporate white publishing did recognize the value of this new reading material and made its interest known by publishing best-selling works such as Soul on Ice, the autobiography of Malcolm X, Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. These works were read by Black folks from all classes. Prison writing, both letters and books, carried the message that it was possible for incarcerated Black men to educate themselves for critical consciousness through reading. In his life stories, Malcolm X shared that reading and critical thinking led to the formation of critical consciousness. This was the period of my critical political awakening. I came to consciousness at the end of the 60s. During my first year of college, I read the necessary texts required for an English major, and I devoured the work of Black writers and thinkers. Now and then, these writers were taught in newly formed ethnic studies classes, but for the most part, I found them through conversation with dissident thinkers of all races. So, what happens when a society has a Department of Education that removes the Civil Rights Department, that shuts down all of the programs for Black students, for cultural responsiveness, for social emotional learning, what happens? What happens when they get rid of the ethnic studies courses at your colleges? Because that's happening. What happens when they get rid of the women's history courses at your colleges? Because that's happening. What's happening and what will happen when they close down ethnic studies departments at your colleges, much less at the lower education levels? So, where would you be having this conversation? Where would students be having and finding this information if we don't go a step beyond in this hour and start doing the educating ourselves? As she says here, as in my childhood, I found more Black writers by going to the public library. I turned again to libraries to fill the gap. Libraries, as we have been saying and continue to say, are that third space that we have to and need to invest in. This was an amazing time because the prevailing mood was one of resistance and transformation. Militant Black power leaders were calling all Black folks to take responsibility for building healthy self esteem. Reading the right books was deemed essential for self actualization. Much of the work Black writers published, such as Don L. Lee's From Plan to Planet, Life Studies for African Minds and Institutions, had long book lists at the end to guide the reader to further work. Lee's book was published by Broadside Press, Institute of Positive Education. There were many similar works circulated as pamphlets. Even though many of these new Black thinkers were coming from middle class backgrounds, they were addressing their message to the Black masses. And by doing so, they continued a tradition of anti racist resistance, which encouraged all Black folks to read and write, to develop critical consciousness. All Black folks, not just the scholars, not just the people that hold the doctorates, all Black folks were being encouraged to read and to write. This focus on reading, writing, and publishing was a crucial intervention because it helped lay the groundwork for a public cultural context where the development of Black self esteem could be identified as a personal and political necessity for all Black people. Conversation, dialogues about the issues were a vital part of this cultural revolution. When we read about the lives of militant Black power advocates, we learn that many of them were challenged by interactions with their friends and acquaintances to educate themselves. The conscious raising group, the political discussion taking place at the social hour, were in all spaces where individuals could find support for education and critical consciousness. This was a cultural revolution at its best. It promoted dialogue, debate, exchange, and in this atmosphere of independent thinking, Black folks were learning how to decolonize our minds and build healthy self esteem amongst each other. It wasn't exclusive, it wasn't ticket only, it wasn't just once a year, it wasn't a getaway treat or event. This was an everyday, common man to intellectual scholar discourse that was happening. They didn't relegate it to just a few. The systemic murder of Black leaders was a conscious political effort on the part of the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal state to stop this cultural revolution. State sponsored or supported terrorism sent the message that Black folks who challenged the existing status quo risked their lives. The destruction of militant black organizations, the seduction of an assimilation based desegregation model, all encourage black folks to turn away from any kind of revolutionary dissident thoughts. Racial integration was the political shift used to diffuse black militancy. If black folks could be perceived as having gained a measure of social equality within the existing structure, then there was no need for further protests. And so you have Gen X, who becomes the first beneficiaries of this new assimilation project, this new integration project happening with some of the Gen Xers. We were some of the students that even into the 80s and 90s, we were still desegregating schools. We were still being bussed into all white schools to make sure that they were desegregating and integrating black students. We are a product of that generation. Integration was the location where black folks were invited to embrace the ethic of liberal individualism, to move away from the notion of communal racial uplift that had been at the core of our politics and our liberation struggle. The demise of a mass based political movement for self determination effectively diffused and, in many cases, eliminated, the cultural context for a mass based movement for critical consciousness that pushed the primacy of education. And now that we have added in not just Black American, right? Because beyond the 80s and into the 90s and the early 2000s, we've had an increase of the African diaspora that has come to the United States. And so their stories began to merge and intertwine with our stories. And while we have a different relationship with the power structure in the United States that our counterparts in the African diaspora and the Caribbean diaspora often do not have, we now have people pushing back to try to tell us that our part of the story is not as important. And this is where Black Americans push back. This is where Black Americans oftentimes say that we have a very specific relationship with the United States and its chattel enslavement system and the repercussions of that are still affecting Black Americans today. And so it is good to hear Amanda Seales tell her fellow diasporan Africans that you don't get to rewrite that part of the story, that you don't get to step over that part of the story for Black Americans, for Black Indigenous Americans. But Bell Hooks brings up an important point here, is that individualism began to work through our communities and diffuse that collective consciousness. Many ways it is still present with us. We can see the collective consciousness when the majority of Black people have said, we're going to sit some of these things out that we see happening, because America has already told us in very black and white terms how it feels about Black Americans. So we're going to sit some things out. You can still see the collective consciousness with a song like Boots on the Ground, where Black joy is being expressed, and people are even upset about the Black joy that's being expressed. Because if it was, instead of a trail ride, if it was a riot, then that would be the model that people could look at and say, oh yeah, that's what we think about them. But you can't do that with Boots on the Ground. You can't do that with a trail ride. where everybody, thousands of people are together enjoying themselves, singing, dancing, men, women, and children. It's giving family gathering, and people feel uncomfortable when they see that image because it so does not fit with what we've been told about who Black people are and how they come together. Yeah, I'm going to read one more section. I'm going to stop and give an opportunity for some talk back today. By the early 80s, Black nationalist thinking and practice was reduced to a subcultural phenomenon seen as mainly relevant to disenfranchised classes of quote unquote inferior Black folks who were represented as lacking the skills and know how to successfully make use of the rights and privileges awarded them by mainstream white culture. Middle and upper class Black folks witnessing the ravaged self esteem of a new group of Black folks raised in predominantly white settings where racist thinking and action was the norm began to turn in the direction of lifestyle based nationalism, i.e., trips to Africa, wearing ethnic clothing, natural hairstyles. The radical emphasis on education for critical consciousness had diminished. Oftentimes, these individuals were white identified Black folks who in the white world, no matter how they behaved. It is the group of people Ellis Coles writes about in his book, The Rage of a Privileged Class. Turning away from whiteness toward romantic nationalism, these groups of privileged Black folks often still suffered from the crippling low self esteem that led them to over identify with some idealized notion of whiteness in the first place. Often their embrace of Blackness was just as idealized, their bond with Africa a fantasy bond. In both cases, the idealization mask of deep insecurities and feelings of lack of providing pseudo self esteem. And so, a distinction must be made between the healthy self esteem that ensures that an individual will learn about their past, their ethnic heritage, and the pseudo self esteem that is created by utopian fantasies of the past. Healthy self esteem allows us to accept and love ourselves just the way we are, and that includes our ethnicity, while recognizing at the same time that we are always more than identities we cannot change. Clearly, it has been detrimental to the self esteem of Black folks to be focused all solely on race, as though it is the only aspect of identity that has any meaning. No wonder then that Black folks hoped that equal rights would lead to an end to racism, to not having to live in a world where race mattered too much. And as they tell us to not be so focused on race and ethnicity, they are in fact trying to erase every gain that we've gotten, not since the 1960s, but since 1875. If you go back to 1875 and 1877 and the compromise that was made, they want to put us back there to where you don't have Black leadership in any sector, and especially you don't have Black political representatives. Hence, what's happening in Texas, where they are literally trying to erase the seats where Black congressional members sit. They're not trying to erase all Democratic seats. They're trying to erase the Black ones. So when someone tells you to ignore what the problem is, we cannot, because they're not erasing all the seats. They're erasing the ones specifically where Black people are sitting. So yes, the issue still continues to be about race and ethnicity here in the United States. while they tell you that that's not what the issue is. That's called gaslighting. All right. We have covered and shared a lot with you today. Hopefully, you'll have a lot to think about and parse over. We've talked about reading, writing, publishing, Black self esteem, and our need to do the reading ourselves, the writing ourselves, the publishing ourselves, support Black independent media. And as someone told me the other day, there is a difference between Black owned media and white owned media for Black people. Let me say that again. There's a difference between Black owned media and white owned media for or directed to Black people. Support Black media, support your Black authors, buy their books, support your Black bookstores, shop at your Black bookstores, order books to come to your Black bookstores. If you're a writer, write. As Dr. Stacy Patton says, write with fire. And if you're a reader, keep reading, keep sharing, start a book club, start a podcast, get into the public sphere, into the public space, and start reading. Read aloud. Read aloud if you can. If reading is not your forte, pick the books up on audiobooks and listen to them. There are a lot of audiobook programs now that are available. If you have trouble acquiring books or getting to your local library, check out the Libby app. Okay, lots of books on there, ebooks. You put your library card number in, you can check ebooks out and read them on your device. As I said before, we have so many more tools to help us do what we need to do to be better, to increase our learning, to increase our sharing, to educate our young people. We have to not make excuses for the results that we want to see. All right. Um, Ben, I think you're with me today. I am on Facebook. So if you will hop over there to have our talk back, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. If you are watching us by YouTube, you can join us for the talk back on my Facebook page. Go to Black Table Talk. We are there now if you want to continue watching. I want to thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you for subscribing to the page. Hopefully, we're looking to hit 1,000 subscribers this week. That will be absolutely great. And this video will process on YouTube and it will be available tomorrow. Thank you again for your time and attention. Take care, be well, and most importantly, be light.